Man and Machine is brought to you by HighFlex Mobile Hose Service, Shannons, insurance for motoring enthusiasts, and the following sponsors.
Yeah, baby!
It's unbelievable!
Now we're talking. We're at the NASCAR Hall of Fame in Charlotte, North Carolina. There's a whole world of NASCAR history here, so let's go inside and check it out. So Buzz, thanks for having us here. Can you tell us a little bit about the NASCAR Hall of Fame? What is it all about?
Well, the NASCAR Hall of Fame was opened in May of 2010. It's a $200 million project. It's set in Charlotte, North Carolina, which is really the heart of NASCAR world, if you will. About 98% of all the teams are within a 50-mile radius. And NASCAR is really, it's developed into a world-class sport. What we try to do is capture the entire history of the sport, the 65-year history, and then even go beyond.
Can you touch on the history of NASCAR and just give the viewers a bit of an idea of where it all started?
Certainly. Bill France Sr., who founded NASCAR, was born in Washington, D.C., was a mechanic, drove in the early races in the D.C. area, and then he moved to Daytona Beach in 1934. He immediately got involved in the local racing circuits around Daytona Beach, and he realized that racing could be a very, very big thing if it was organized. He was a driver. He was on the bad end of business deals where the promoters would run off with the money and he wouldn't get paid and all this sort of thing. So he promoted a race in 1938, and it was a very big success. And he said, this is pretty good, you know, I think I'll cut back on my driving and see if we can get some organization to the sport. So he brought the best of the sport, all the best drivers, mechanics, promoters. They all agreed it was a great idea, founded NASCAR, and they ran the first race in February 1948. And there's been no looking back. It was tremendous because the average person can relate, because that car on that racetrack is just like the one that I drive. So over the years, American automotive manufacturers have used NASCAR for a research and development platform, and a lot of the innovations that are in the average passenger car today were developed through NASCAR. Better brakes, better tires, stronger, lighter metals, better aerodynamics, better fuel mileage. Whether the average citizen realizes it or not, NASCAR has been a very important part of their life.
Tell us a little bit about the moonshine element with some of the races.
Rumor had it that some of the early NASCAR competitors were involved in the transportation of untaxed adult beverages, AKA moonshine. And they were outrunning the law. If they got caught, they were going to jail. If they got beat on Sunday at a little local dirt track, no big deal, they lost a race. But if they got caught on the road, they were in deep trouble. So they had to learn how to modify their cars to get the best performance, the best handling characteristics, all this. And most of the early technology was actually developed on the back roads of North Georgia, North Carolina, of these enterprising young men outrunning the law.
And tell us about the entity that NASCAR is today. It's grown into an enormous lifestyle, basically, hasn't it, really, as far as the size of NASCAR?
The high-performance automotive industry in North Carolina is a $5 billion a year industry just in the state of North Carolina. Not just from the race teams, but the different companies that supply the products and develop products and all that, and you know, advertising firms and public relations firms. It all adds into the mix, more or less.
It's certainly very big business, isn't it?
Indeed, it's very, very big business, and it is a very, very important part of American society.
HighFlex Mobile Hose Service, your complete hose breakdown and on-site service partner. HighFlex Mobile Hose Service offers a complete range of quality guaranteed hydraulic and industrial hose and fittings products. We also specialise in preventative maintenance programs such as on-site hose condition auditing, testing and compliance. With our national fleet of qualified technicians, you can rely on HighFlex Mobile Hose Service's rapid response to all of your needs. Call 1300 HighFlex, 24 hours, 7 days a week.
Shannons Club, a hub for motoring enthusiasts. So join, create your own garage, share pics, videos and stories of your current and past machines, connect with other enthusiasts. Be sure to watch Shannons Club TV with a host of dedicated motoring channels, including past episodes of Man and Machine. So jump on board with Shannons Club. I'll see you on there. Absolutely fantastic to be here. Can you tell us what this area is here? And you can start with this car here if you like.
Sure. This is Glory Road, and it starts at 0 degrees of banking on this end of the road, and it gradually winds up to 33 degrees of banking on the far side, and that replicates every turn in NASCAR racing. And we have a kind of an evolution through the 6 generations of NASCAR, starting with the first super duper car of NASCAR, the Hudson Hornet, the fabulous Hudson Hornet, and made famous again through the movie Cars. But this was a flathead 6-cylinder engine with dual carburetors. They were allowed to run the duals since it was legal, since it was over the counter piece. And anyway, it blew away all the V8s until around 1955. It could not be beat.
So Buzz, tell me about this 57 Chevy here.
This car was part of a factory-backed team. General Motors came out with this model, special high performance, and it was called the Black Widow, and there was a fleet of these that raced in NASCAR in 1957. Buck Baker won the 1957 NASCAR championship with this car. And if you notice on the wheels, there's 6 lug nuts. They use the suspension and the rear axles from a GMC truck. And a little extra safety, a little extra, kind of high performance parts there, although they were still stock. You could not modify them with aftermarket pieces. They had to be over-the-counter pieces. But that was one of the very first factory efforts in NASCAR.
And Buzz, tell us about this car here, this Ford.
No, this Ford is a 1961 Ford Starliner, and it was produced right after the opening of the super speedway era. The big tracks, Atlanta, Charlotte, Daytona. And as you notice, the beautiful sloping roofline of this car, this is when American manufacturers really started paying attention to aerodynamics and how much a part it played in NASCAR racing on those big tracks. You wanted to try to drop your drag as much as you possibly could. So they were coming up with very, very nice, just beautiful, beautiful flowing lines of these cars. And they work very well on the big speedways. And
what power plant was under the hood of this car?
This one here, it's 375 horsepower, but it was actually a 390. You hadn't gotten into the big 427s and things yet, but you were still using a fairly large engine, but they were kind of heavy too. And in the next generation, they realized that you could lighten them up a little bit, still make them very powerful.
Now, Buzz, here's a car that I believe had a lot of controversy in its day.
Controversy, that's the key word, yes. This is known as Junior Johnson's Yellow Banana. The reason it's a banana is, of course, it's yellow, and it's got the drop nose, it's got the swept up rear quarter sections. The windshield has been laid back drastically. The roof was chopped. In fact, Fred Lorenzen had to mount the seat on the floor so he could get in the car. Highly, highly modified. And NASCAR, that's not what NASCAR was all about. But Ford was on strike at the time. They were upset about some rules that NASCAR had come out with. And, NASCAR was trying to get some Fords to race. So this is a good way to get Ford back in and generate controversy too. Because of this particular car, the template grid that is used in inspection now it is still being used today. It's all because of that car right there. That's the one where NASCAR said, we better start looking at those bodies here. Something don't look right, So they implemented the template system, and it went just from a couple of wooden templates now to this gigantic grid that they use on the cars, and trying to keep everybody honest.
In the day also, in the 60s and early 70s, they used that drop nose trick in the Trans Am series as well, and effectively they were trying to get that car to slip through the air quicker. It was all about aerodynamics, wasn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, aerodynamics was vital. In fact, even today, that's one of the only advantages you're going to get.
And Buzz, I believe there was a bit of a turning point with some rule changes with this car here in this year.
Yes, there was. And up until the banana car here, NASCAR had what was considered the first generation of NASCAR race car, meaning stock bodies, stock frames, stock engines, a little bit of modification in the final years of that generation because of the super speedway era, and you needed special wheels, things like that. But this car here, this was a unibody car, meaning that your front chassis clip was here, your rear chassis clip was here, and then the car kind of held the two together. The car acted as the connector. Well, there was no way you could race a car like that. Way too much flexing in the car, so they had to piece a piece of chassis between the front and the rear clips, and that became the very first step to hand-built chassis. You still had to use the stock components here in the front and rear, but that was a major turning point for NASCAR.
So Buzz, this Torino here, I believe this could be possibly the holy grail of this collection here?
Definitely one of them, yes. This is a Holman & Moody Torino Cobra. David Pearson drove it to the 1969 NASCAR championship. He also won the 1968 championship in a nearly identical car. But look at the aerodynamics of this car. You've got that long sloping roof, and you got a little bit of a spoiler on the back. That was all you were allowed at the time. Now they got those big things on the back. But the nose was the key to this car. It had that drop nose. It was an extension of the 1968 front end. Instead of having that flat nose, this had the little drop nose. And this was in the midst of what was called the Aero Wars, which was Ford against Chrysler. Chrysler came out in late 1969 with the Dodge Daytona with the long nose, the great big wing on the back. In 1970, they brought out the Plymouth Superbird, which was its counterpart. But it was a major, major war between Ford Motor Company with their Fords and Mercurys and the Chrysler Corporation with their Dodges and Plymouths. And that started in September of '69 at Talladega with the opening of the Talladega Speedway. And then it lasted all through the 1970 season. So it was very entertaining.
And did this vehicle here actually sport the Big Boss 429?
Oh yes, yeah, right there on the hood it says 429, and what a monster! It was a monster engine.
Effectively designed to compete with the 426 Hemi, weren't they?
Absolutely, yeah, they certainly were. Yeah, it was a real kind of a neck and neck competition there. Everybody was trying to figure out how are we going to beat the other guy. In 1974, they did away with the big blocks altogether, and everybody had to run under 360 cubic inches. But they were still able to get that much power and that much speed out of those smaller engines. It's amazing.
This is a famous number in the NASCAR scene. Number 43, Richard Petty. Tell us about this car.
Oh, yeah, well, arguably the most famous number in the sport. He has the most all-time wins, 200. The second guy, the guy in second place in wins is David Pearson. He has 105. So Richard has nearly twice as many as anyone else. This is the first year he went to Chevrolet. He had been racing with Chrysler Corporation for years and years and years, and Chrysler really didn't have anything that was competitive. So he had an opportunity to go with General Motors. He's got this Monte Carlo, and he won his last championship actually in this car in '79, and that is a big car. Holy cow, that hood is just, when you're sitting in that driver's seat, I can't imagine having to parallel park one of these things. That hood is amazing. You could probably build a whole car out of metal that's in that hood right there. But that was one of the biggest cars I've ever seen. And it looked like it would be a rather kind of unwieldy, but it was extremely competitive. And anybody who drove those cars, Cale Yarborough, Darrell Waltrip, any of those guys, they all did very, very well with that great big old Monte Carlo.
So obviously this vehicle used the good old small block Chevy engine platform. What sort of power outputs were they making in the day in race trim? Yeah, well, they were still running the 358, and they would get about 650 horsepower out of that. Pretty remarkable. And when you think about the basis of that engine, it was debuted in 1955, and they still were using it. I mean, even years beyond this. The small block Chevy engine is arguably the most successful engine ever built. Well, effectively, the engine base itself, that small block Chevy, was virtually the same as that Black Widow 57 Chevy engine right through to this modern era with increased capacity.
That's exactly right. Yeah, that same engine. This is the banking of Talladega Superspeedway. Currently, that is the highest degree of banking in all of NASCAR.
Can we test it out?
Well, let's give it a shot. You don't want to do this after a night of heavy drinking. Okay?
That's amazing, isn't it?
A little tough on the ankles there.
Hi, I'm Dennis. This is my 32 and I run Aeroflow.
Hi, I'm Paul. This is my Attack 56 and I use Aeroflow.
I'm Scott. This is Blown Inheritance. Makes 1,700 horsepower and we depend on Aeroflow.
Hi, I'm Graham Cowan. For race-winning performance, I choose Aeroflow. Aeroflow, way to go.
Aeroflow, manufacturers of professional hose, fittings and a whole range of performance products to suit your vehicle. To download the latest Aeroflow catalogue, go to aeroflowperformance.com. Proud supporters of the Aeroflow Outlaw Nitro Funny Cars.
Damn, there's just no room under here.
There's no need to do this anymore when you can buy a Tough Lift hoist starting from only $24.50. With over 20 models in their range, including 2-post, 4-post, scissor lift, motorcycle and truck. They're great for storage too. All Tough Lift hoists have Australian Standard certification and WorkSafe design registration. With an impressive warranty, in-house technical support and installation options Australia-wide, what are you waiting for? Check out toughlift.com.au.
I love my Tough Lift.
Hi, I'm Carolyn Kruger from On Track Accounts. Not only am I a racing fan, but I love my motorsport at every level. If you're a car enthusiast like me, come in and have a chat about your business accounts, BAS lodgements, or getting your personal tax ready. We're a small but dedicated team of enthusiasts, and we like nothing more than getting your accounts back on track. Find us at ontrackaccounts.com.au.
Wow, Buzz, what do we have here? What's this area?
This is the Hall of Honor. It's really the heart of the facility. This is where our 5 inductees are enshrined each year. And as you can see, it was designed in a circle so that nobody gets put in a corner. Each inductee gets a platform for one of their cars that's related to their career. They also get a glass case for memorabilia and artifacts from their career. And they also get a spire. Now, we didn't want the traditional bust or the plaque like other halls of fame. We wanted to be a little different. So we came up with this idea of a spire, and it kind of encapsulates their entire career with audio and video and statistics. And at the end of their year, like next January when we bring the new class in, we'll take this spire off of this mount and we'll mount it on the exterior wall, and that'll be a permanent part of the Hall of Honor. So we have enough room for 20 years of inductees, and at the end of 20 years, I don't know what we're going to do, but we'll figure out something.
And whilst we're here, Buzz, I've noticed a very famous name, Fireball Roberts. Tell us about this car.
This car is really one of the icons of the sport. This was a very interesting story here. You had Fireball Roberts, who was a Daytonan. The car was built by Smokey Unick, who lived in Daytona. It was sponsored by Stevens Pontiac, which was a local Pontiac dealer, all Daytona effort. And Fireball went out and won every single race he ever entered at Daytona Speedway in 1962. All the qualifiers, sat on the pole, won the Daytona 500, won the Firecracker 250 in July. He was the first driver to ever sweep an entire track's season of events. So he really was a groundbreaker too. He was one of the first guys to become a household name. People who didn't really know much about the sport knew the name Fireball. Very colorful guy, very classy too, very media savvy, a great athlete in his own right. And he was a tremendous, tremendous benefit to the sport.
So with this car, not only did you have the driver talent of Fireball Roberts behind the wheel, but you also had a very innovative car builder in Smokey Unick behind the vehicle itself.
It was a perfect combination. And you know who was kind of an unsung hero on that whole Pontiac high performance deal back in the early 60s? Yeah, they dominated NASCAR racing on the big tracks from 1959 to about 1962. But John DeLorean from the great, yes, he was the whiz kid with General Motors, who was in charge of the performance division of Pontiac. So his name hardly ever surfaces, but he was one of the guys that was behind this whole program.
Now, for the viewers, Smokey Unick was incredibly innovative, wasn't he? He always thought outside the square, didn't he?
Oh yeah, he could not be restricted by rules or by, you know, parameters or whatever. He was always coming up with something new. He would think of things that I don't know where it came from. It's like, you know, this could never possibly work, but it worked.
And I believe that the manufacturers actually used him for a lot of R&D, a lot of testing.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, he was definitely, if you were a manufacturer, you wanted Smokey on your side. I remember his late wife, Patty, told me back in the early 70s that General Motors had him on the payroll for, it was a pretty sizable chunk of money. She said he didn't really have to do anything, but they just wanted to make sure he was on their team. I'd like to be like that when I grow up.
Yeah. So tell us about this car here, Buzz.
Yes, this car was driven to the 1952 NASCAR champion by Tim Flock. He was one of 3 brothers and a sister that raced. This is actually a replica of the real car. The real one was lost years ago, but it is an exact duplicate of what Tim Flock drove in 52, and then he drove it in 53. Now, if you look on the other side of the roof, you'll see the name Jocko Flocko. You wonder, well, who's Jocko Flocko and why 2 names on the roof? It turns out that Tim Flock had a live rhesus monkey ride with him as co-pilot for 8 races in 1953. It's the only time in NASCAR history that a co-pilot or 2 people were in a car. And poor old Jocko, he got out of his seat at a race up in Raleigh, North Carolina, and Tim was running second, which paid $1,800. And Jocko, he was just going crazy inside the car, and Tim had to make what he called a monkey stop. It wasn't a pit stop, it was a monkey stop. Had to throw the monkey over to his crew chief, got back in the car, finished third. They only paid $1,200. He said, the darn monkey cost me $600 and there was going to be no more monkey in the race car. A little bit of NASCAR folklore there.
Amazing, I've never heard of such a thing. Now we're talking.
Yes.
Plymouth Superbird and the big 426 Hemi.
Now, when you talk about American muscle, it doesn't get any better than this. This is incredible. This was a factory-based car. This car was produced by Chrysler Corporation, and it was their answer to Ford in the Aero Wars of 1969-1970. It had that long, slopey front nose on it. It had the scoops on the fenders to release any air pressure that might have built up. It had the gigantic wing on the back, and I've talked to several drivers who actually competed with these, and they said, I said, how good was that car? He said, well, he says, if you're driving a race car that you cannot spin out, that's pretty good. He said it was almost impossible to spin this car out. And combined with the 426 Hemi, it was just a bear. And Pete Hamilton, who was a driver from Massachusetts, fairly new on the circuit, he was the team driver to Richard Petty, and he won the Daytona 500 with this car and then went on to win both races at Talladega Superspeedway. And it was huge for him, it was huge for Chrysler, and it's just, you'll never see these days again.
Honey, what are you doing out there?
Waiting on the next Super Blowout 3-day only mega sale.
You don't need a sale, you need MPD.
NPD's everyday prices are competitive, and our huge in-stock inventory and dedicated export department allows orders to arrive fast to Australia. National Parts Depot has quality parts for Mustang, Camaro, Chevelle, GTO, Firebird, Ford, and Chevy truck. Go online or email export@npdlink.com.
Working beats waiting.
A tough car needs a tough oil, and that's when you need Gulf Western Oil. It's Australian-owned, developed and manufactured in their state-of-the-art production facility. So no matter what you drive, you can be assured you're in the right hands for all your lubrication needs. Gulf Western Oil, the tough Australian. An old-school workshop, Buzz.
Indeed. Yeah, this is where magic was made back in the late 1940s. Red Vogt, who was the guru of all race engine builders back in the day. This was a recreation of a corner of his shop that's set on Marietta Street in Atlanta, Georgia. This was about the state of the art back in the day. Nothing fancy, very utilitarian. And you can see his engine stand, and he's got these were jack stands of the day. And you have a bead breaker for breaking your tires off of your rims. Really, really neat stuff. This was actually designed by a couple of fellows who used to work in the shop back in the 1940s when they were kids just out of high school. So this is a great, great representation of what Red Vogt shop was. It didn't get any better than this.
Well, Buzz, here's a famous car, and a car that was very dominant for quite some period.
Oh, yes, the 1956 Chrysler 300. Tim Flock started the season in 1956 driving this car for Mr. Kiefer, and then they had a falling out. Buck Baker took over the ride, and Buck won the 1956 championship with a car just like this. This is a replica, and what we did on here, we really wanted to show the differences between a street car of the day and a race car of the day. So we found this car in California, and we sent it up to Petty's garage. Richard Petty and his crew restored it for us. And yeah, Richard's father raced one of these. So Richard he kind of made this one of his own little pet projects, more or less. And on this side, you can see where you've got a roll bar, and you've got the lettering on the side, you've got wide wheels. And then if you go around to the other side of the car, you can see the street version. And other than some cosmetics, there wasn't a lot of difference. You can see the white wall tires, you can see the full front seat, and it's got the headlight in it and all that sort of thing. So we felt like this was a very good graphic example to show the folks exactly what the car of 1956 was all about.
And the Mercury outboard team were extremely dominant, weren't they?
Oh, yeah.
Annihilated everything, didn't they?
Oh, my goodness, yes. Yeah, very, very strong. 1956 and the 1955 season also. Tim Flock won the 1955 championship. So they had back-to-back championships with this team. And Mr. Keycafer was way ahead of his time. He had everyone dressed up in the same uniform. He had big trucks that carried the cars to the races. I mean, back in those days, some of the guys were actually driving their race cars to the track. And then, of course, if they wrecked them, how are they going to get home?
Now, was he the owner of Mercury Outboard?
Yeah, he was the inventor of the Mercury Outboard engine.
Wow.
And he felt that NASCAR was a great way to advertise his product. So he was so far advanced over the traditional thinking of the sport back in those days. He
businessman.
Indeed, indeed. Yeah, and then by the end of the 1956 season, he realized that there were no more worlds to conquer in NASCAR, so he moved on to another project.
Buzz, thank you so much for showing us around the NASCAR Hall of Fame. It's been an amazing experience.
Well, thank you. It was indeed my pleasure, and we're honored to have you here. And if I ever get to Australia, I would expect the same out of you.
Thank you very much. You got it.
Yeah, you're welcome back anytime.
Thank you, Buzz. Well, what a spectacular visit it's been here at the NASCAR Hall of Fame. It has absolutely blown me away. I could easily spend 2 days here and still run out of time. There's a whole world of racing history to see here. If you're ever over in the USA, visit North Carolina, come down to Charlotte, you've got to see this place. It's well worth the effort. Well, that's it for our USA trip with Man and Machine, and we've had an absolute ball. I love Australia, but I feel equally at home at this place. It is absolutely amazing. We've had a great time, and I hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you next time on Man and Machine. In coming episodes of Man and Machine, we're back on home soil. We get to check out some fantastic car collections during the Aeroflow Power Tour. Then we head to the Nostalgia Drags at Sydney Dragway for some tie smoking action. Make sure you tune in for this one, you definitely don't want to miss it. Man and Machine is brought to you by Hi-Flex Mobile Hose Service, Shannons Insurance for Motoring Enthusiasts, and the following sponsors.